Hello everyone. In this lesson we will continue with the state management using BLoc, and in this lesson I continue with the example of login and authentication using Firebase. This example allows user to log in using their email and password and using their account, their Gmail account. So let's start by creating Flutter create Firebase login block. So Firebase login block here is my project name. Okay. So wait a few seconds and then you open with Android Studio, browse to your project, wait a few seconds and remove some unnecessary code. For example, theme data not necessary, home not necessary, and remove my home page widgets and replace the home with my widgets. So you can add a center inside and surrounded by a scaffold, and inside the center we have a text widgets. So here we have body of text and the text here login with Firebase. So we will log in with Gmail or log in with email and password. We set the text style, font size, okay, and run the program to see. So after waiting Xcode build, and we can see the output login with Firebase. Okay. So remove the scaffold, the text, and then we replace the center and child to give you more easier to see the output. Okay. So in Google we search for Firebase console and create a new project by pressing add project, and so we have Flutter code here, and then we render two versions of iOS and Android, and we have two files, two configuration file: Google Service info plist for iOS and Google Service.json for Android. Yes. Then the iOS folder here and the Android is here. Then you must search these two files and save to this folder, or they save to this directory. So change directory to iOS and open this file, this Xcode workspace, runner Xcode workspace, and you must copy your bundle identifier. Let's copy this, and here in the project you can remove the O. Yes, I remove the O, I create and I remove. Yes, and recreating for you to see. Then press to iOS and paste the bundle identifier to this, and press add and press download, and browse to your folder inside the Flutter folder of your iOS project. Okay. And here you click to this file and drag and drop. You click to this file, drag and drop. Yes, and press OK. Drag and drop to your project. Okay, so in this file I can open to source. Yes, this is a photo for your Android, and this is written in Kotlin. So click to main activity.kt mean Kotlin, then copy this identifier and add a new application, choose Android and paste here. Okay, and press register up. Okay, so next then we see that the Google service must be saved here. Yes, you must save this file to the app folder inside the Android folder. Yes, click to here and inside app, yes, paste to here. I think paste to here is enough. Okay, so next, and then we are in project level build.Gradle. So click to Gradle of your project and paste this line to here. So it is Google service, and then in build Gradle of your application module, you copy this line to apply plugin and browse to here, double click to build Gradle of your application and paste to here, apply plugin. Okay, and save this file. Okay, so copy this line for Google Firebase or Google Analytics and paste to here. Yes, Google Firebase Analytics. Yes, and skip this step, not necessary. And then we have two configuration. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this lesson. See you in next lesson. Hello everybody. In this lesson we continue with the login and authentication using Firebase and BLoc. So in this lesson we firstly open the pub/spec.yaml to insert some of the library. Here we have a Firebase core and Google login for user to log in using your Gmail, and Flutter block for state management, and from awesome Flutter is used for set the icon, and reactive Dart for some other. Okay, so firstly we need to create a new package of repository, and repository is where you get the data for the entity or the model. So you add a user repository. In user repository we define a class named user repository. This class has two properties: Firebase authentication and Google sign-in. And Firebase out, and the second property is Google sign-in. Okay, so these two objects are get from the Firebase library we have just added in the previous lesson. So the constructor user repository has two parameters: Firebase authentication and Google sign-in. This have two property, and two property here are Firebase authent dot instant and Google sign constructor. We need to initialize the Google sign-in, and we get the instant object of Firebase out. Two question mean that the default value. So it is a constructor for user repository. We also have a function, a future function. A future function means an asynchronous function, and it will return to the result of sign-in email and password. And I call the function of sign-in with email and password of Firebase authentication. The input param here is email and password, and you can trim the email or the password to remove the unnecessary space text after and before. Okay, the file here is asynchronous, so the function, and you must await. Await mean after the result of sign-in email and password of Firebase out finished, it will return. So I use await. And the future function of create user with email and password. This is a register user. The function of register user with email and password. and you return to Firebase create user with email and password, and this is also an asynchronous function, and it return await. It also return await. Okay, so await Firebase out dot create user with email and password. So we also have another function, a future. Return value is void, mean so sign out. Yes, sign out is also asynchronous. And the function here is return future.wait. Future.wait mean we call these two function. After two synchronous function finish, then the sign out function is finished. So we call two function, and every two function must finish, and then the function will be finished. Okay. And the future here is check, boolean to check. Check a user is signed in or not, and I return to the checking of current user. If the current user is not null, then the value of this function will be true, otherwise it is false. Yes, so it is checked for the user sign in. And we also have that function of get user to get the login user. By calling get user, the return value is Firebase user, and we return to Firebase out dot current user. Okay, and in main function, so here I can test this function. So I can test by open Flutter tutorials in Firebase console, press to sign method, and enable email and password, and enable Google. And in user, you can see a list of user. Yes, you can see a list of user here. Okay, so let's so let's check by run the program. So we have an arrow like here. The arrow here is please update setting.writer, because the plugin core web not found, and the out web not found. And to fix this, you run the program here, and then continue. Yes, not null, continue. Then by checking we refresh the user list, but not user here, so maybe some problem with my configuration for Firebase. So click to setting ratio, and you may fix by adding this code of line, this line code. Okay, we adding this line of code to add Flutter plugin to using UTF-8 to add the name of the library. Okay, here, or the name of the plugin. Okay, so they run again the program again, and after that remove this log code of line and paste to here. So we initialize a user repository and call the create user with email is huang123.gmail. Okay, and run the program. Okay, so I can see the output. Okay, so by checking, we move your mouse to the authentication tab and test. Yes, okay, so we have two user has been created here. Then you can delete. Yes, delete the user, delete this user. Yes, unnecessary. And then change the user here is Huang222. Yes, and rerun your program again for checking. then you can see the output. Okay, and refresh. Okay, 1222 has been added to authentication. Yes, okay, good. So I can use this function in the next lesson to do with state management using BLoc. Okay, thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Bye bye. Hello everybody. In this lesson we will continue from the previous lesson with state management using BLoc, and in this case in this lesson we continue to define a function for logging in with your Gmail or your Google email. So the name of function here is sign in with Google. Firstly, we need to create the Google sign-in account here. When user press sign in using Google, a form will display allow user to fill Gmail email address and password and press login. Then we will get the ID token or the access token. The ID token and the access token provide when you press correct email and correct password of your Gmail, and it will create a credential authentication credential from ID token and access token. It is from your email and your password, and then you call sign with credential. You copy the authenticate credential and add it to the input of sign with credential. Yeah. Then if every line of this function has passed, then the function is successful. So the authentication state has three states. We have three states. The first is initial, and the second is success, and the third is fail or failure. Yes, failure or fail. Okay, so we have three states of the authentication. So you create a package of states. The states contain many states inside. So the authentication state. Firstly, the authentication state I define by defining an abstract class for the parent class as authentication state, and I override the prop getter. It allows you to compare two objects of equal. So you define class authentication state initial extend from authentication state. With the authentication state success, you have a property of Firebase user and a property of authentication state success. So the authentication state success here is a constructor with the parameter is Firebase user, and the props here is Firebase user. Okay, I think it is enough. Firebase user, and I override the toString, also mean the detailed information of the object. It returns to a string which contain the email property of Firebase user. I also have authentication state failure. This state is fail when user sign out, or there are some problem when you log in with your user. So login register form. Okay, so we have email, we have address, etc., and we have property of is valid email, is valid password, and is submitting, or is success, or is fail. Okay, so we have several property inside, and the state, our state here will contain every property like this, but the value is different. So we define a login state. we define a class login state extend from class login state, and this class cannot be, the object cannot be changed, so I call this at immutable. At immutable means the object which has been created by this class cannot be changed. Yes, it is a state, it cannot be changed. It only changes if you use map event to props, map event to state. Okay, so here I define some of the above property. Is valid email password, submitting, success or fail. So I define the constructor login state as every property here inside the constructor, and it is required. So press at required. Okay. So each state is an object or the static object. Yes. In this case, each state here is a separate object, and then you can use static or factory method. Okay, so the factory method is a method that you can call by using your class name dot function name or class name dot method name. Okay, so we define the initial function factory initial, and I return a login state with some property here. So the initial may be valid email password is true, but the submitting and is successful is 4. Okay. So loading state, I also have a function name, a static or the factory method name loading. Okay, so I also return to here, but the submitting is true. Yes, it's submitting is true. Failure state or success state. Failure state means that we have is successful. Okay, is successful false. Yes, but is failure is true. Yes. So two property inside a specific state, and here it is a state of failure. And now we define the remain state, success and success state. And if it is success, the is success is true and the is failure is false. So now I want to clone this object because the object is immutable, so you must clone to add to the new object of state. So I define a name, a property name, a function name, class, login clone with, yes, with some of the property like here. I can clone a specific login state object. It is unequatable. So you copy and paste to here, and I redefine the property here, and then by reading from my user interface email and password. Okay, so is valid email, it's like here, is valid password. I check that the password is proper, and here if every property is null, it will unchanged. You can use the old property or unchanged. Yeah. So now we clone an object and update that object. We define a function name clone and update. Yes. Clone and update means that the property will be cloned and then modify the value of properties. So we define own property here to clone and to use when you want in the map state, map event to state function. So I return clone with is value email is here. So it will get the change value. Here it is called clone and update. Okay, clone and update. Clone with. Yes, and I also define a separated property of is valid email and address, email and password, and it is a value of is valid email and is valid password. If two of this property is true, then the is valid email address, email and password is also true. Yes, and what about Dart file? Define register state, and I do the same as with login state, the same as with login state, the same as with is valid email and address, and the same state of login state, initial, loading, failure. Okay, and now I define a validators. A validator class contains many functions to validate the input parameter by using regular expression. So I define class validator. We have function of is valid email, and I return and I create a regular expression object with a string. The string here is a format for an email address, and I return for checking by regular expression dot pass dot hash match input parameter email. Okay, and what about the password? Password is more simple. In this case, I only require a password is bigger than 3 characters in length, and I can define a one-line function like this, a one-line function on another function. Okay, so this is the end of my lesson today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next lesson. Bye bye. Hello everyone. In this lesson we continue to part 4 of authentication and login using Firebase and BLoc. In this lesson we right click to the lib and create new package name events. Event package contain every events of this application. So create a new Dart file, name it authentication event. So the authentication event is a class extend from equatable. Yes, the prop getter allows you to compare every object of equatable. The authentication event started extend from authentication event, and we also have event login, event logout, also extend from authentication event. Then right click and create more Dart file and name it login event. So the login event also have an abstract class login event extend from equatable, and we have constructor, we have props getter, and I define a class of login event email change. This event means that when user type one text, one character, type one character in the email text input, and the login event email change is called. Yes, okay. So it is called when one character in the email is changed. So I override the props. So here it's email property, and I also override the toString to show the detailed objects of login event email change. Okay, so the toString here is detail. I show only email, and here I also have login event password change and here constructor and override the toString. Yes, and now we also have login event with Google. Yes, so here you log in with Google or pressing sign in with Google in the user interface. So we have class login with email and password, and this is also managed by Firebase. The Firebase will give you a token key. Okay, so the login event with email and address have two parameters, email and password. Okay, and here is the constructor. Yes, the constructor require you must input email and password. Yes, okay, so the props here maybe email comma password. Yeah, it is the array of two value. It is also used for comparing two type of objects, or the two objects of login event. Okay, and I copy it here and show detailed information about this object. Email is equal to email and password. It's also equal to $password. Okay, $password. Yes, so it is login event, and I do similarly with register event. Yes, register event, something the same like login. You also have register event password change, email change, and okay, so copy and paste. Okay, and register event press, email and password. Okay, yes, change to here, change to password. Okay, so it is the end of my lesson today. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye. Hello guys, in this lesson we can continue with Firebase login and authentication with BLoc. This is part 5. So in part 5 we will define BLoc. Yes, we have event and now we have BLoc. So right click to libs and define a new package named BLoc, and add Dart file inside this BLoc. So I add authentication BLoc. Okay, we have authentication BLoc. It is a class which extends from a generic class BLoc. This class has event and state, authentication event and authentication state, and enter to import the BLoc library. Yes, okay, so now you must implement a method of map event to state. Map event to state means you have an event, and after this event is raised, then the state will be changed, and here there is a new state will be returned inside the map event to state function. The property of authentication BLoc is our user repository, and the constructor require the user repository as input, and you must check whether the user repository is none. Then you assign the user repository to the input repository, and you must extend from the parent class and with initialize the initial state. So the initial state here is authentication state initial. Okay, so missing semicolon at the end. So this is the initial state, and then you can check the event type. So the event, if the event is authentication event started, or check if the event is so for easier to understand, you can rename the event variable to authentication event, and you check if the event is event login or event logout or event started. Yes, we have 3 cases, and you check for and now I check if the I call the function is sign in. If the EI sign is okay, then the user repository will return a user. Yes, a user will be returned here, and I assign it to the Firebase user variable. I assign by calling, and then I yield the new state. So the new state here is authentication state success. Yes, okay. Input parameter here is a Firebase variable or Firebase property. Yes. Yield authentication state success. Otherwise, you yield to authentication state failure. It means that in this case, the user does not sign in. So here, the authentication state success, you must get it from the user repository by await user repository dot get user. Okay, so easiest to understand. So otherwise, if it is logout, so you call the function of user repository dot logout, sign out, and you yield the authentication state failure. Okay, so we have 3 state: failure, success, initial. Yes. Now we also have another block. In this case, we have login block. We create a new class. Login block stands from generic class block. Login event and login state. We have property of user repository, and I initialize with constructor. Check for the user repository must be not null, and I initialize the initial state. So here it is the initial state. We also have the function of map event to state to return to the new state when the user add an event. Okay, so write unenter to import the right library, and I set the name here is login event, and I check if the login event is email change. If the event is email change, then I yield or I return partly. I yield, okay, a sync star, and I get the login state here. It is only for easier to understand, because I know that the state variable here is login state, so I assign it a value for easier to read code. And if the login event is login event email change, then I yield a login state which change the is valid email to the validator.is and is valid email function. and dot email. Okay, I validate and I yield to the I change the current state. So the current state does not change, but the value of the property inside the current state is changed. Okay, else if login event is so I check for login event password change, means that when you type to the screen, you type, you change the password. Otherwise, in else if login event is press login with Google, and otherwise now it's login with email and password. Yes, we have several buttons. The button here is to when you press to login email and password, and here I yield the updated state. So I clone and updated the state, so the same as with email. In this case, you must try cat to detect the error. So the cat here means no parameter or hide parameter. So you call user repository.sign with Google. After finishing this, I can yield the login state success. Okay, otherwise login state fail. Okay, and in the case of login with email and password, you can call the user repository dot sign with email and password, and fill the login event dot email and login event dot password. Okay, yeah, you fill the property value here. Okay, and then you yield a login state dot success. Okay, so now I give two adjacent or two nearby event or two continuous event have a debounce time. Debounce time is a duration between two events, or the minimum duration in millisecond between two events. So you use the debounce time. So you implement the transform event method of the login block with input parameter here is event and transition function. So you define a debounce stream variable, and here you change to login event for easier to see. And the login event you filter every login event. You filter, this is filter where mean filter in Flutter or in Dart. You must return true fail here, and it is the condition. The login must be email change, or the login event maybe login event password change. Yes, two of this value is okay. Semicolon, and I define another non-debounce stream. Yes, I filter the non-debounce stream and return to if the login is not login event change and not login event password change. Okay, so it is not debounce stream, mean it does not have the debounce time. Yes. So you must import the reactive Dart to allow debounce time. Yes, you import reactive Dart mean Rx Dart, and then you can set the value for debounce time here by debounce time method, and initialize under a duration, the duration millisecond about 300 milliseconds. Yes, when you transmit from one event to another event, it takes about minimum of 300 milliseconds. Yes, so 300 milliseconds minimum for each event. And here you can concatenate two array stream by using merge with. Merge with means concatenate two stream from non-dependent stream to dependent stream. So it is concatenation. And right click Dart file and define register block. Register block is the same as with login block. It also have the user repository property, also have the map event to state, and with a little bit different. So if the register event here, it will show register state dot loading. Then after this line success, it will yield the register state dot success. Yes. Or if it has exception, so this function will yield a failure state. Okay. Okay, new and is simple block observer. Simple block observer is a class which extends from block observer. Block observer is what when when state change, event change, then it will show you the error, the transmission, and what you do, or it allows you to show the easier the flow of the block. So this will block you. Okay, so you must allow this by adding it in the main. Firstly, widgets dot flutter binding dot initialize. It is only for the binding function in the text input or text view. And you set the observer property of block to simple block observer object. Okay, then you remove unnecessary code. Okay, so this is the end of my lesson today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in next time. Today we continue to build the user interface of your application. So my application contains many components in the previous lesson, and here I define the my app widgets by removing the scaffold. It is not necessary. It removes the scaffold and replaced by the block provider. Block provider has two parts. One part for create block object and one part for using object. So this is to create block by using block provider widgets with the property of create. Create is a function, and the function here I create a block object inside this function. So we define a final authentication block, initialize the authentication block here. Yes, and input parameter here is user repository. User repository is a private property of my app, and I define it as final. It is for initialize one time for each widgets. So I initialize the user repository here, and then I input the user repository with underscore. Underscore mean like a private. So we paste the user repository here, and I add the event. The first event is the authentication event started to the authentication block. Yes, I initialize the authentication event started and add to the authentication block and return the authentication block. So for simplified, you can use only one line function in this case. So I remove and replace with this one line function, authentication block, initialize, and then add and return to the initialize to the initialization of authentication block. Okay, and in the builder mean where to use the block, where to call the block. Also, the builder property here is also a function with context parameter. So context and authentication state, you can use the variable name state, but for easier convention you can use authentication state here. Firstly, check that the authentication state is failure, is success, or is initial. So we have 3 states of authentication state. If the authentication state is success, I return to home page. Yes, so I display home page here. Otherwise, if the authentication state is state failure, then I return to the login. But the login, in the login, I create the login block. So add create function of login block. Login block has input parameter of user repository, transmit from the parent widgets or from my app widgets. And the child here, so the child here is login page. You must initialize login page here. So I can see that the splash screen is the first screen, and in the splash screen I can navigate to login page and login with and navigate to home page. So we have some case depending on the authentication state. If the authentication state is failure, it login, otherwise success to home page, and in other we navigate to the splash screen. So I define a package name, page or screens are the same. Splash page. So define a widget name. Splash page is stand from stateless widgets. Okay, so I override the function of build. The build function returns a scaffold. Scaffold has body, a center, and in the center we have a text. This is a plus splash. With the font size is 22. Okay. So right click to page is package, and I can add more by copy the same format and create a new page by choosing Dart file. I name it home page. Okay. Then I define the class of home page. This is home page. And the color here is I can choose a color of green. Yes, depending on your purpose of defining your user interface is not important. So click to main and replace the code here by returning to home page. Initialize splash page. In the case the authentication state not success and not failure. So the first is return home page, and the second part is return login page. So import the library. So right click and Dart file and name login page. So this is a login screen or login page. The login page is stand from stateful widgets, because in this we have a form. We have some input, some text input, so we must define stateful widgets. We have two classes. One class stand from stateful widgets, and one class stand from state generic class state of login page. We have a constructor of login page with two parameters, key and user repository. Key is automatically create with different value for different widgets. So it is a login page, and you must require the user repository. You must import meta.dart to allow required annotation, and you must check for user repository must not null, and inherit from the super class or using super, and when enter to import the material.dart to support key. To support key. So the login state must implement the build function. So we have an email, we have a password, so we must have two text editing controller, email controller and password controller. We also have login block, and we also have user repository by using a getter function. The getter function here is user repository, and get the user repository from the object of widgets. We also implement the init_state function. In init_state function, I initialize a login block by calling. Here I get the existing login block from the block provider by using block provider.up. And when the value of email is changed by the user from the user interface, it must add a listener. The listener listen to which change on password or on email. So in this function, this function is called when password and email is called. The user interface return a scaffold widget. The scaffold widget has child, has the body of block provider. I get the block from here by using block provider generic class of login block and login state. So builder is a function of context and login state. And here I can check the login state is failure, login state is success, or loading. So I print now login fail, otherwise if it is submitting, I print now login in, and otherwise if it is success, then I navigate. I add event. I add event. So I add the event of authentication login. It is here mean that the user has been logged in to the system. So the state here is authentication event login state. So I return to padding, and the padding here is which is the padding value up, down, left, right is 20 pixels. And the child of the padding is a list view. So the list view can contain multiple button or multiple text form view here. So this lesson stop here. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye. This lesson will continue with the text field, email and password. I set the declaration using input declaration. The input declaration contains icon and label text. The icon is on the left, and in the right you have a text input like the input declaration below. And the keyboard type is the email address, so it will show a keyboard with supporting characters for email, and auto validate is true, and the autocorrect may be false. And the validator is a function. The validator allows you to validate the input is good format or incorrect format. So if the login state is email address, then the validator will return none. Otherwise, it will return invalid email format, or it will display a red text showing that invalid email format. The second part is text form field with the password controller. The declaration is lock icon, and the label text is enter password. And you must obscure text, means that the text will display ***, and the auto validate is true and autocorrect is false. So the validator here, I do the same as with the is valid email, but here is valid password. Okay, you can change it, is valid password, not email. And the padding here is symmetric for top and down. So the child here is a login button, and how can I can define a package which contain buttons, and I define a login button inside the buttons package. Okay, so here is a login button. I define a class login button extend from static widgets. We have a login button constructor with key and on press. On press here is function, so I can use a function with void callback. The type is void callback, or simplify, you can only set it as a final value. So the void callback is an internal property of login button, and it is assigned to the on press when you initialize the login button objects, and I inherit from super key or the parent class key. You use a button theme, the button theme, to decorate a button with a height is 45 and the child is a raise button. The raise button has background color blue, a shape of border shape. The radius is circular 10, and the content here is log into your account and increase the font size. Okay, and then you import a login button here, and I write login button initialization of the on press. On press here is a function. The function here is transmit from here. By checking it is enabled or not. You can check by defining a function name is login button enable. It is a method of this class. Input parameter is here is a login state. So the login state here check that the is valid email address and is populated. Yes, populated means you must have at least email controller text and password controller text, not empty. Yes, it is a populate condition, and here is not qualify for valid email and password is populated and not submitting. So this condition ensures that the login button is enabled. Yes, so this button must be enabled by using this function. So in on press, I check for is login button enable with the login state. If it is true, or otherwise it's fail by using ternary expression. The ternary expression here is when it is enabled, the function is called. So we have our function name on login email and password, otherwise it is null or do not call anything. So I define a method of name on login email and password. On login email and password, this is a method. This method is called if the login button is enabled. Okay, missing some comma, so missing something. Okay, so replace with some valid code line. Okay, so how about this function? This function will call an event or add the event plugins event with email address. Press when you press to this login, yes, and here is with the press email and password. Okay, so how about this function? When add listener, it will add the event of login event emails change. Otherwise it will in the case of password controller, it must add login event password change with the password here is password controller.text. With the password controller.text. Okay, so now in the main widgets, we replace the child here with login page, initialize the user repository, reference the repository to the property of user repository of login page. Okay, so now debug your program again, set some breakpoint. Yes. Okay, set some breakpoint and give some of the breakpoint in BLoc, breakpoint in event. Yes, this is quite important because your code must run inside the BLoc or the map event to state function. Okay, so first time we the authentication state. Yes, it is the first time it is initial. So next. Okay, so it shows the splash screen. So if the authentication checking is started, so next, so check for login. Okay, so check why it is login. Yes, it is is login is true. So here the login check for the current user in Firebase application is not null. And next, and check. Okay, so maybe you have just login. Yeah, so you must open the Firebase console and remove the existing layer and test again for checking. So you must come to here just for checking. So see you next time in the next lesson. So thank you very much for watching. Hello, this lesson will continue by checking the login user, and in this widget I can check by adding a sign out button for testing. Yeah, you can add a button to allow you to sign out your application, then you check sign in again. So you must sign out for test firstly. I add the app bar in here, initialize the app bar for scaffold of home page. Title here is a text with this is home page, okay, and the action here is a button in the app bar. So the icon button here, or we can have icon of exit and the on press function. I call I get a block provider from block provider and add authentication logout here, okay. So when you press to this icon or this button, an event of logout has been sent. So debug the program again to see the output. Okay, so the authentication state here is initial. Yes, the first time it is initial, and it display splash page, and the authentication event here is okay. Yes, and next for checking it is sign or not, and here is sign is true, so it will get the user information. And next, okay, and I check for the state authentication state success, okay, authentication state success, and next, and it display home page, okay, and click to the sign out button. Yes, the sign out button will send an event of authentication event logout. Next, okay, and in this case it is logout, then I call the logout function, okay, logout. Yes, next, okay, and I check for if it is full, then it shows the login page, okay. Yes, okay, so now it shows the login page and it is disabled. Login to your account is disabled because it is not validate. It is not validate, or the validation is full. So the on press function will check if the login button is enabled. It must allow you to press. Okay, so type a name, for example 1123 at gmail.com, and the password is 123456, and here the button is enabled. Now it is enabled because the validation is okay. Log into your account, then it will send this event. Yes, nice. Okay, now login phone. Why the arrow here is why this arrow? So login phones return GMS Firebase authentication. So here refresh. Okay, no. So it failed because the user does not exist. The user does not exist, so you cannot log in. So you must create a new user by registering a new user. So you must create a register page here. The register page allows you to register a new user or sign up a new user. So create a Dart file and name it register page. Okay. So class a register page extend from. So it is something like the login page. Okay. So it also have a constructor, also has the build function. The build function also have some checking for some text form field. Okay, and we have register button. The register button is something like the login button. You can define it by adding new register button Dart. So the class of register button, I enter to import. Yes, and I also call the navigation byte by calling the navigator object, the function navigate. Okay, so navigator up context pop, register, and I import. Okay, and register button on press, and a login page. Okay, and below I add a register button here. Okay, create a new Dart file, and I name this file is a register user button. Yes. So it is class of register user button. Yeah, it is the same as with the login button. I enter to import, press enter to import, press enter to import button theme, to import flat button, yes, to import block provider. Okay, and import, yes, import. Okay, yes. So it is okay for importing. And the child here is user repository. Okay, for checking this, and here at the register user button, initializing user repository. Yes, and use user repository. Debug your program or run or debug your program. Yes, user emulator here. Wait a few seconds to see the output. Yes, so the program is showing. And then you press register a new account here to see the output. So press register new account. So remove and add a column inside this, and add the button inside the column. Okay, here's column chat. Yes. So login button and register button paste to here. Okay. So thank you very much for see this. See you next time. I set the login and register button inside a column which is with the cross axis alignment is stretched. And I set the padding for about vertically 20 pixels. Okay. So I also add a padding below the login button to have a separate space between login and register button. So in register button, I can the register page. Okay, and something else. So in register block is where the state is changed depending on the input events, and the simple block register to save the history of block. Okay, so in register page, I can register the block. Okay, and add a breakpoint to. Okay, and running the router task. Okay, so application state and next. So firstly, the splash is display, and if the event authentication event is started, then it check for signing in or not. Okay, the state here is failure, so it shows the screen of login or register. So press to register new account, enter your information, for example Huang123@gmail.com and 123456, and then refresh. Okay, no, I cannot see anything. I cannot see any user here. So press register, yes, and the register block and register state here. It is true, so the register block is added. The register event, press event, and next. So here we have the information of the register event, and next. So it yields the state of loading. Yes, nice. Okay, so now I can check by refreshing. Okay, so in this case I can see my email address and the password has been changed to the UUID. So type again gmail.com and register, okay, and login. Yes, now the action here is login event with email and password. Press and then next and check. Yes, login, and it yields to the success. Yes, so the authentication state here is successful, and then it will display the home page, which is for you to see. So this is a home page. Home page is where to display to ensure that you have logged in to your account. So press sign out, then the event of sign out has been called, and then here. Okay, so I define a dash file for Google login button. Yes, you have a Google login button inside a class name. Google login button stands from state languages, and I return to a button theme for customizing the button with high 45 pixel child razor button with icon. The icon here I get from phone or some icon Google. Text color is white, and the label here is a sign with Google, and the text style is white. Okay, so the font size is 16. Okay, now so the on press here is a function, and it reference to the block provider up login block, and I set the event of login event with Google press. So the color here is red accent, the same as the color of Google button. Okay, so below the padding I add the Google login button between two padding widgets. Okay, so I press a breakpoint to here. Login event with Google press. And in splash screen you must set a breakpoint here, run debug. Okay, so now wait a few seconds. Yes, and the first time it shows the splash screen. The second time it check for the e-sign and press Google sign, then next. So I can save the login state from state. So the login event here. Okay, next. Okay, so sign with Google. So in this case, so the function sign with Google, you can press, and okay, the arrow is here. The arrow because you must generate the key SHA1 or generate some key by calling rather W sign. Okay, so we have SHA and SHA to 256. Okay, and you press paste to here, save, and you continue to add fingerprint here, and copy the SSA to 256 here and paste to here. Okay, so paste to here, and then you download the Google service.json and save to here app folder and save. Okay, and replace, and then now you can call and run again, but you must clean the Flutter project firstly by calling Flutter clean. Okay, now so you can press run and see. Okay, so after pressing to Google sign in, and you choose your account and allow here, so here to allow authentication. Yes, so the same as with some previous lesson. So let's check in your real device for checking and see it is maybe. So this is the end of my lesson today. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.